there's a thing that you have to do here to maybe it's just bottom. It's there. Can you go to the next slide? No. Oh, okay. And stop the hour. We are ready to go. Yeah, okay. Good morning, everybody. This is the Regext working group. My name is Anton Verschuren. It's my co-chair, Jim Galvin. Welcome to Singapore. And of course, the first thing we do on the agenda is read the note well. Anything you say here will be recorded and will be property of the IETF, so that you all know. Quick look at the agenda. We have some extra welcome and introduction statements, so please pay attention to that. We have, of course, our existing documents, and we have a report from the interim working group meeting and some new work. So let's start. We have Jeffrey Scribe, which is Barry, our area director, and we have a minutes taker who is Rick Wilhelm. Thank you, Rick and Barry, for doing that. The note well we just read, and of course, one of the things that we always mention is document management. We are a small group, so we always expect, if people write documents, they need to be reviewed. Please volunteer for that and do it and put your comments to the mailing list, even though there are just comments of, I like it, I have no further comments. Further up in the meeting, we'll get to a point where that sometimes fails. One of the particular questions that we have for this meeting is document shepherds. Every document needs a document shepherd when it's submitted to the ISG. So far, Jim and I have always sort of like searched for a document shepherd just before a document was submitted to the ISG or when it was already submitted. We had a suggestion from other working groups where looking for a document shepherd during adopting a document for the working group would be a good idea. Because at that time, the volunteer that is shepherding the document also is aware that he needs to follow the process while the document goes through the working group. But we are sort of like worrying whether or not we should make that compulsory. So when we are adopting a document, that a document author should be looking for a document shepherd. Of course, the document shepherd should be somebody that is not one of the authors, should be sort of like independent, but he needs to follow the document and have some content. And Barry's at the mic, so.
This is Barry. Thank you for picking on one of my real pet projects. A while ago, I wrote a document about extended document shepherding, and it didn't go anywhere as a publication, but it's in the Working Group Chairs Wiki. So anybody who wants to look at that can go to the Working Group Chairs Wiki, which is accessible to everyone, and read that. And it's my opinion on how to keep documents moving along by active shepherding throughout the life of the document. So thank you for feeding into that. I agree that it's a good idea not to make it mandatory, but encouraging that to happen will keep documents moving. And remember, no matter how you shepherd a document, no matter when it's assigned, the document shepherd job is not just to write the shepherd write-up and then disappear. We really want the shepherd to poke people and make sure that things don't get forgotten, which often happens when there are comments and then it takes months to resolve them. So thanks.
Yeah. And having said that, Barry, being a document shepherd is not that hard or that difficult. It is an excellent opportunity for people who are new to the working group or new to the IETF to get used to the the process. You don't have to have real content-wise knowledge, but just to be able to follow the process, meaning that the only thing you really have to do is write up what happened in the working group, which is like, I don't know, there's a template for it that you can fill in. And for the rest, when comments come back from the ISG, the only thing you need to do is make sure that all the comments are attended to. So you don't have to understand what's in there. You only have to know what, if there are 10 comments back, that 10 comments have been responded to. So for people who are new to the IETF, a great opportunity to get to know a lot of people and get introduced to the process of the IETF. Okay, thank you. So that's about document shepherding. You have a comment?
Okay, so one last thing in the introductions is please to ask everyone, as is typical, you know, that NOMCOM is here, they have office hours, there are folks around. You know, they are always interested in comments about your leadership, in this case, area directors. So Barry, who is helpfully being our Jabber scribe here, let's keep that in mind. I'm going to offer comments about Barry. No, but in all seriousness, for all of the area directors and even those who are standing, new people who want to come on board, the NOMCOM is very much looking for comments. And there is a form that you can go to on the website, on the NOMCOM website, so that you can submit comments that way, or clearly just reach out to anyone who you see with a NOMCOM sticker on and offer comments about it. It's an important part of our process. And of course, as always, with respect to the chairs, if you have comments about your chairs, you're welcome to stand up and say nice things at the microphone. You should see Barry in the back of the room if you want to say bad things. Or you can always send a note to the ISG if you have comments that you want to make.
Just to be clear, I am not up for any NOMCOM appointed position this year, so you won't be commenting on me in any case.
Okay. To our next topic on the agenda, existing document status. We have one document in the RC editor queue, so that has passed the ISG. It's the fee extension, and I believe everything is going well with that. Then we have two documents in the ISG evaluation state, which is the logging security extension, and we also still have the domain mapping for strict bundling. Now, that is one that we might give some attention to, because there was some confusion in the ISG why an informational document came from this working group. We have some problems explaining that to the ISG, because usually we do standard strike documents. This is, of course, something that's typically for the IANA EPP registry, where we allow documentation of any sort for proprietary or experimental or whatever extensions in EPP. Normally the process for an informational document is go to the independent document stream. But this one we reviewed in the working group, and thus we gave it a tag of being approved as an informational document for the IANA registry. I don't know if anybody has comments on that, knows how the process works. I sometimes feel the need, especially when talking to the ISG, that they have to repeat how the EPP registry, the IANA EPP registry, has been set up that way. Why we want to have any documentation. The initial intent of the EPP IANA registry was that we were looking for any extension that was out there, and we wanted to have it documented. And we wanted to take that as a sort of basis of looking which ones we were going to standardize, or which we could standardize, and for other people to look at extensions that they might want to go and develop, but there already was something that sort of looked like it. That's different from other IANA registries where you just have protocol numbers or anything that is set as a standard. Yeah. So for the bundling,
so I see John Kang here in the back, and I have not actually had a chance to talk to him about this, but so the action on this document, it is sitting with the ISG, and Barry may want to add on to this here as I get into this. So the idea is there's been some discussion about it being an informational document as a working group product, and the suggestion from a preference here would be to make it an informational document and have it come in through the independent stream instead of being a working group product. That's all. And so we will be asking John Kang. I'll talk to you more about it afterwards. Hadn't had a chance to catch up with you on this as we put all this together. But that's the action that will go on this document. So that's the way it'll proceed from this working group. So I think that's it.
Yeah.
And over to the mic here. Barry.
Yeah, this is Barry. That's basically right. The issue isn't completely that it's informational. It would be reasonable for this working group to put out certain informational documents, but something that appears to be defining the same kind of thing that's coming out of this working group as proposed standards, but this one being informational is what struck the IASG as odd. And it will definitely go much more smoothly if this just goes through the independent stream. So that's definitely the recommendation. Just on the other one, to clarify, I don't believe that's in IESG evaluation yet. That went through last call, and the action is on me right now to make sure everything is ready, and I'll put it in IESG evaluation.
No, that was my intent. Scott.
Scott Hollenbeck. I actually have a little bit of experience with a situation similar to number 2. Some number of years ago, we had this thing called RRP, or the Registry Registrar Protocol, that was used in the Network Solutions and VeriSign shared registration system prior to the existence of EPP. And there was a suggestion to bring that to the IETF and standardize it. It didn't work out quite that way. People didn't want to see RRP standardized, but they did want to see it documented, right? And anyway, so the long and short of it is, one of the suggestions was to make it clear that this is, an informational thing coming out of NSI and or VeriSign, was to, in the title, say the NSI Registry Registrar Protocol, which eventually became the VeriSign Registry Registrar Protocol. So one suggestion here, consider modifying the title, to something like the CNNIC EPP Domain Mapping Extension, blah, blah, blah. I think that'll make it clearer that, hey, this is where it's coming from, and it helps to explain why this is an informational thing as opposed to something that is on the standards track.
Yeah. Good suggestion. Yeah.
Just for clear, I think the orange document, the status, so maybe a lot of years already a lot of years work on this document. The original version, I think, is for standard track. So after working group discussion, so this is just for a few registries, mainly the Chinese domain name registry. I think it's not just for CNIC, that Hollenbeck mentioned. Actually, is for many Chinese domain registry. For example, in there's an organization called Chinese Domain Name Consortium. A lot of, for example, the HKNIC, SGNIC, MONIC, so .Asia. So a lot of Chinese domain registries there. They all follow. We also have a Chinese correct table mapping. So they all follow this this document. I think there's a few registry, not only for CNIC. So because we have a long hard work, a lot of years work in this working group. So I like to continue as a working follow the working group document as the follow ISG evaluation. Thank you.
This is Barry. If you want the document published, The best way to do it is through the independent stream. The IESG has made that pretty clear. So you can not do that if you want to, but it's not likely to get published if you do.
Yeah, so I understand that, you know, it's used by multiple registries, but it's not used by all registries. We had, of course, in the preparation for this draft also a bundling BOF where there could also not be, there was also no consensus on what sort of bundling was appropriate and could fit all. And one of the results of that was, okay, we're going to see if we can get the strict bundling variant documented for EPP.
So I think for when we initial discussion, we have a lot of maybe bundling situations. So the working group decides there's many bundling registration. There's a strict bundling registration, and some are relaxed bundling registration. So this is mainly focused on strict bundling registration. So I think it's already used by Chinese domain name community or registry or a lot of registrars. So in future may also can extend to used by other name ASCII names. It's okay. For example, name 1 and name 2 is if they are the strict bundling share a lot of information. I think they all can use this information this document. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then we move on to documents in working group last call, which are two documents actually. It's the data escrow and the object mapping documents. These could have been out of last call already, but there were last minute changes that needed to be made to the DNDR object mapping documents, and we put that in the second working group last call. And we didn't get, so far we only got 2 responses of people saying, okay, we approve this document in working group last call. This is not enough, folks. We really need people to react also to a second working group last call and put a comment on the mailing list that you agree that the changes in the second working group last call were not substantive or that they were okay. If we don't get any response to this, this is not going to be published. So please read it on the mailing list and state your support so we can move these documents along to the ISG. Oh, do you want to comment, James?
Go up there. You might as well come here. Yeah, I'm Jim Gould from VeriSign. I'm the document shepherd for the registry data escrow specification. And in my responsibility as document shepherd, I did a detailed review of the draft, and I have some what I feel are editorial changes to the draft, but I really want feedback from the working group to confirm that. Specifically, and I'm going to post this to the list, by the way. I just have some highlights here. One item is associated with, since the draft refers to registry, registrar, there's already an RFC that defines those terms to refer to those, that RFC. Also, in the examples, as document shepherd, I need to validate the examples. And the issue is that there's use of ... in the example. So what I did was I went in and created full examples for each of the concrete types supported by the draft. In doing so, I found errors in the example, and my recommendation was to include those examples in the draft for clarity. As I got down to the XML schema, I noticed that the XML schema was importing the EPP-COM XML schema, which in essence created a hard dependency to the EPP RFC, which was concerning to me. But then when I dug a little deeper, it wound up where the data type that was used, that reference, was actually not being used anywhere within the draft. So in essence, it was just hanging out there. So my recommendation is, and I'll put this on the list, the data type RR type is not being referenced. I don't believe it will have any issue related to removing it and any associated, the import of the EPP-COM schema into this schema. So in essence, I'll be looking for the working group to confirm that, but my recommendation is to go ahead and remove that. And then one final element is associated with supporting different types of deposits. So we have a scenario where for the registries, the ICANN accredited registries, we need to provide it's called BRDA, that uses the data escrow drafts, but it's really not data escrow. They're really not. So we had some discussion, me and the document editor, to be able to make the drafts be explicit related to the fact that this is a different type of deposit. It's not data escrow. It's a form of deposit. And so the decision was, or the recommendation was to not to change the types defined in the base draft, but to actually put into the mapping draft a tag or an indicator of the fact that this is for a different purpose. So since the mapping draft is in working group last call, I'll be making a recommendation to add an element to be explicit. And so that's it.
Okay.
Oh, about the length? What was that? Which one? Oh, well, yeah. Well, the concern, and you could speak up to it as well, is the fact that in changing the schema or removing an element from the schema, there's a concern related to whether or not that would cause any interoperability issues. And that if that were the case, we may need to be able to reach out to a broader set of folks to ensure that it, in fact, is not an impact. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
So let me I'll add to that and add a lot more context, I guess. So Jim Galvin speaking, and not wearing a chair's hat here. These documents have some history. And in fact, one of the issues here is that they are broadly implemented in the GTLD market, amongst registries and registrars. So the documents have been required of GTLD registries and some registrars here since the last round of new GTLDs. So the issue here is to make sure that whatever we do, we don't change these documents in a way that creates an interoperability issue or or that they remain backwards compatible. So in fact, what Jim Gould was just talking about with wanting to change the mapping document to add an indicator in it, he's going to go back and think about the best way to do that so that the document remains backwards compatible, just in case. And so that's just something we're bringing to the attention of this group. You know, the reality is we're going to hear more later about our joint meeting with Tech Ops. That is sort of our opportunity to get broader exposure of some of our work with more folks in this industry. And we're going to see some examples of work that we're going to bring from there to here. But that's the context that's going on here. So, Jim identified some issues that we ought to clean up and just make stable and clean, I guess is the right word, but do that in a way that doesn't impact existing implementation as much as possible. So that's the goal. And we'll bring this to the mailing list for one last look when we got it all settled and have a suggestion for doing all of that. Thanks.
Roger Carney confirming both of these documents are going to get revised, right?
Right. So, Jim, again, get revised, but not in a way that should affect implementations. So, yes, the version number on the documents will probably increment, but it should not affect anything that anybody does.
Okay, so do I get it right that probably the data escrow document is also getting a new revision? So we need to put it, is it substantive enough to make another working group last call after that?
Yes, this is Jim Gould again. Yes. Based on the feedback, and I'll provide a long list of feedback, it will certainly require an update. And based on looking at the mapping draft, it's most likely would require an update.
Alex Mayofer. Just to clarify, so the documents are going to be revised, and the existing working group last call on the two documents will also cover the revised documents. So they're going to be revised like in the next couple of days, or will there be a third working group last call? I'm confused about the timeline.
Yeah. Okay, so one of
it doesn't make sense for me to review it on the working
exactly
group now.
Yeah,
that's all good.
That's why I asked the question. You know the DNDR object mapping, that one is in second working group last call. If there are changes to that document which are purely editorial, then of course it stays that way. But I understand from James now that the data escrow document is also going through a new revision. And so we are going to place another second working group last call for that one as well. So,
yeah, for both documents, they will get a rev and a version number, right? As long as the changes are editorial and they don't affect interoperability in any way, there will not be another working group last call. It is that revised version taking into account the working last call comments that will then go forward and be published. But if there is a technical substantive change, then we will have to do a working group last call, although hopefully we can make it relatively short. We'll see.
Correct. And this is Gustavo for the record. Yes, I mean, the time frame for this update should be in a couple of days, so pretty quick.
Okay, so that concludes our current document status of at least anything that we're not working on anymore. For an overview, this is our milestone review of the milestones that we are supposed to be doing or have done. You'll see a lot of them already done. We move on to the existing work now, and we have Mario is going to present something on the RDAP documents. So let me put your slides up. Oh, how do I do this? Yeah, this is what I thought. Does it? Oh no, it's this one, of course. Okay. So which one do you want to start with?
Okay, hello everybody. I am Mario Alfredo from .t Registry. Just a couple of slides to no matter partial response. To summarize the most significant changes made on the documents since the last meeting. A lot of these changes resulted from the feedback provided by Tom Harrison. Thank you, Tom, for your extended review. It was very, very appreciated. Let's start with the draft about partial response in RDAP. Please, next slide. Two versions have been published since last meeting. In version 03, the version 03 added the unicorn name field in the ID field set when a returned domain or name server is an IDN. And the currently active version contains a recommendation for the RDAP providers to include a self-link in any field set different from the full field set. This is to allow the end user to request for additional information than the provided information. We can now move to sorting and paging draft. Okay, next slide, please. In this case, three versions have been published since July. In the version 04 replaced the LDH name with name among the sorting properties. The name sorting property is mapped onto the combination of LDH name and Unicode name. This is because in ADAP there exist two different elements, different views of the same data, and this data is mapped on the same underlying database field. The Unicode name value must be taken while sorting. When the Unicode name is missing, the value of LDH name must be considered instead. This version further clarified the sorting logic with respect to the JSON value types and the sorting policy for multi-valued fields. In brief, this means that JSON strings must be sorted according to the lexicographic order, and JSON numbers must be sorted according to the numerical order, with the only exception of IPP addresses, which are better clarified in version 05. The JCAD sorters parameters must be ignored for the purpose of this sorting capability, and when more than one value is retarded, the sorting will be applied to the value identified by a preference information. It could be, for example, the pref parameter, JCAD parameter. If a preference information is missing, the sorting will be applied to the first value of the collection. The 05 version clarified the sorting logic on IP addresses. IP addresses must be sorted based on their numeric conversion rather than the JSON string, the value. It clarified as well the mapping between the sorting properties and the ADAP fields. Each ADAP provider may define other sorting properties than those provided in this document, as well as it may map those sorting properties on different locations. For example, due to a different implementation of the contact representation. This is the subject of my next presentation here in this session. The currently active version renamed the page count property of paging metadata element to page size, and added a new property in page metadata element called page number. Even if page size and page number seems to be redundant for clients because they can be derived by code, they can avoid an end user interactive by a browser to feel disorientated in the result set. Finally, we have the sorry, I forgot. There is another important thing to evaluate for next version, is how to implement pagination when links can be used. For example, this is the case of a request submitted via an HTTP post. Currently, this is not allowed in ADAP, but it could be in the future if you want, for example, submit complex query, including lot of predicates joined by Boolean operators. The current structural paging metadata element doesn't support this case. A solution could be, for example, to add an optional property named the next carso that could be used in place of links when the request is made by an HTTP post. Last draft. It's not here. But well, the most significant change made on the draft about reverse search is the refactoring of the query model. The query model was made more was made simpler. The query string URL safe, and I try to.
I'll look it up.
Yeah. To entertain you.
I uploaded them this morning, but they should be here.
Yes.
Ah, there they are.
Before. And the query model was made more generic. This is the new format for submit a reverse search query. The resource type must be one of the resource type path segments defined in section 3.2 of RFC 7482. Currently, the possible values for resource type are domains, name server, or entities, but maybe in the future it could be they could be EPs or outnums if we think that entities are in relationship with any other object in ADAP. Role must be one of the roles described in section 10.2.4 or RFC 7483. For role independent searches, the value entity, generic value entity, must be used. And property is the entity property to be used in matching the search pattern. A predefined list of properties includes format name, handle, email, city, country, and country code. Obviously, the service may implement additional properties to those defined. Last slide is about a comparison between the previous way to submit a search query and the current way to submit a search query, to highlight that the new format is simpler than the previous one.
Alex, may I have a quick comment? Yes, I agree to that. I appreciate the new format as well. Much easier, much more natural.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you too.
That was the last slide, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody any other questions for the past three documents? No? Well, we have a question, Mario.
Yeah.
What do you think the current status of these three documents is? Because when I look at the milestones,
yes,
they were about to be published, but I don't know how many revisions you still need.
I know that the current status of this document depends on their implementation, real implementation. I know that there are some in this room is going to implement one or two capabilities of these documents. I know that, for example, Tom Harrison is trying to implement is implementing probably the reverse search on EPs or outnums. Is implementing the sorting capabilities in his ADAP server. I don't know. I know that there are some implementation about the paging made by Google, even if they are a bit different from the one providing this document, because the paging link is provided as a part of a notice and not as a part of the paging metadata section. But I am in contact with the Google guys to collaborate to invite them to implement this solution in their ADAP servers. Currently, I don't know any other implementation about these documents. Obviously, in addition to .it ADAP server, if there are any other implementation, I am happy to contribute to help anyone who is willing to implement these solutions.
Tom Harrison, APNIC. I just had one comment on the reverse search document. The sorting and paging document appears to allow, or does allow, customizable mapping of the fields, whereas the reverse search document appears to be quite prescriptive about what fields have to be used for the reverse search. I think your intent is to allow that to be service specific for reverse search as well. So I think it's just a terminology thing in the draft, just to clarify that servers can do what they want with the reverse search.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Alex Mayo for Nick.at. Just as a heads up, we might start looking into implementing an RDET server in early 2020. So we might not have time this year to start working on it, but it's definitely going to happen in the first quarter of next year. So it's probably too late for the documents, but this is a heads up. So
I think that we must have more time to evaluate these documents, because, for example, in the final report for ADAP pilot project, it states that most of the submitted queries are lookup queries rather than search queries. So I think that now the ADAP implementers are knowing ADAP better, so they can evaluate if this solution can contribute to make their ADAP servers more efficient. So because it depends on obviously on the service provided by the ADAP servers. So if most of the current ADAP implementation provide only the lookup queries, we must have more time to evaluate this document.
So what you're saying, the timelines momentarily on the milestone list, they cannot be met. Should we take one or two off the milestone list for the moment, so that we can attend to other work that we want to do on RDAP?
Really, I don't know, because I can't imagine the scenario from now to
No, we will have discussion
6
on the
months.
milestone.
Probably, maybe there are some new ADAP service implementation try to implement search queries in efficient way. So probably they have to implement sorting and paging and partial response if they want to make their implementation more efficient. But reverse search is a different situation, because it depends on the service that the ADAP server want to provide to the end user or registrar, or I don't know. But for example, we at .it, we want to provide our registrar with the capability to reverse search on their own domains. I don't know if this is the strategy of other registries. I repeat, this with regards to the reverse search, this solution was not thought to be open to everyone. We at .it, we have strong, strict rules about provide the dissemination of personal information. So we are firstly involving in under the GDPR rules. So we want to provide these capabilities mainly to our registrars, because we receive a lot of out-of-band requests regarding reverse search, regarding the list of domains matching some search conditions, search patterns. Now we are before now we are we provide this service as a out-of-band solution. We want to integrate this request in the ADAP server, so we are not required to give an answer in an out-of-band by an out-of-band mechanism.
Okay, so yeah, excellent.
This is Ulrich Wisser. Yes, you started talking about the privacy stuff, and I remember that last time we had somewhat intense discussions around it. And so, and I see that you did updates to the document.
Yes.
Part 2. So I wanted you to elaborate on your update.
But according to the privacy consideration, you mean?
Yeah, privacy considerations and the security considerations.
I have already stated in the document that obviously this, with regard to the reverse search, the reverse search capability, these capabilities must be provided. I repeat, must be provided according the national rules or any other rule about the provisioning of personal information. So if I look to the implementation, the .NET implementation, we want to provide this capability to our registrars. They are legitimated to see the personal information of their own contacts, not the personal information of other registered contacts, obviously. And this is the principle inspiring this solution. The new query model allows the ADA service to provide the reverse search in according to an authorization according to an authorization implementation based on a payroll basis. So, for example, you can protect more registrant reverse search on registrant than the reverse search on technical contacts, for example. This is was not foreseen in the previous version, but I repeat, this I don't know if we are the isolating this we are the only one thinking that there are the need of this solution, because we receive a lot of requests asking for the same information, which is the number of domains related to this technical contact, or what are the domains, which are the domains related to this technical contact, which are the domains related to this registrant, but from our registrars, obviously.
Yeah. So I don't think that the need for the reverse search is in question. I think that in question is the wording of the privacy implications, because right now it says, oh, you should follow the law, and I mean, that is basically true always. It's like, you know, that's just stating the obvious. I think the privacy considerations really would do well in describing what the problem is and probably giving some guidance in what implementers should look at and what they should do. Just saying follow the law is really not that helpful. So
I want to.
I want to.
I'm sorry. I want to jump in here as chair and say that I don't want to fall into the discussion, all the privacy discussion we had last time. It is true, Ulrich. Actually, I do share your concern and what you're saying about the privacy considerations as written. But let me suggest that we take that to the list to look to update that side of things. I want to give Alex a chance here to have a last word, and then I want to drive towards a milestone discussion.
Yes, thanks. Alex Mayover, Nick.it. Just the processing very quickly. In order to solve like the milestone problem that we mentioned before, do we have any feeling that any of those three documents is more advanced than the others, more stable, yada, and so on and so forth, so that we can try to get that one off the list of the milestones as fast as possible, even though if we haven't like 100 implementations for it yet, but we have a good guts feeling for it, and last call it. Yeah, and,
I think
leave
that
the others on the milestone list.
My opinion is that sorting and paging and partial response don't need more updates. As far as I know, they seem to me quite comprehensive. So I don't know.
So they're only waiting for implementation. That's what you're saying.
Sorry.
So they are only waiting for more implementation.
Yeah, more implementation.
So,
but still, I mean, you have done an implementation of that, obviously, I suppose. Yes. So maybe it would be a good idea to find out if there are other implementations for that.
Yeah.
Find out whether they are compatible.
Yes.
Yeah. Interoperable, I would say, between clients and servers. And also, like people like me, who are like looking into implementing that they would maybe try to do a sort of review on that and list any potential implementation issues they would have. And after that, we could maybe like working group last call it. Yeah, I don't remember. Do you have implementation status section in the document?
Yes.
Perfect. Good. So maybe update that and
get it done.
After that last call, those two documents, and go for it.
Basically, they implement this document provides solution, well-known solution in other REST services. So I mean the topic is are quite clear to me.
Yes.
The basic idea is to deal with huge result sets, for example. So I don't know if you want to provide larger result sets in your implementation in an efficient way, because obviously you can provide domain searches returning quite always a truncated result set, but in my opinion this is not an efficient solution, for example.
No, let's look at those. One final last call, and then it's up to you guys, of course. But I'm just proposing a way to get them off the milestones list.
Yes. Okay. Wilhelm, last question.
I'll be very brief, Rick Wilhelm. Listening to this, it strikes me that not just server implementations are helpful, but also client-side implementations are helpful. Speaking two things that offer example. One, in the RDAP pilot working group back over the summer, Marc Blanchet's work on the client side was instrumental in driving a lot of clarity. And then I'll note and I'll admit that I haven't been following this closely, but from what you said, and Tom Harrison's work was instrumental in helping to flesh out other problems. So I think it's not just server implementations like Alex was noting, but also client implementations that would be helpful in trying to drive out some of these things.
I think that most of you know my personal opinion about how to implement an ABDAP client. At .it we are thinking about a self-configuring client based on the server specification provided by the ADAS server. So this is my opinion. So probably next year we'll release another client based on this basic idea.
Okay. Thank you, Mario. So
thank you.
You got the response. We are trying to move these documents forward and get them off the milestone list. And if there anything needs to be done, please do it. Do it on the milestone list. Or do it on the main list, sorry. Okay, next presentation, existing work. And this is actually something that is not on our milestones list. But it came back. Gustavo. So if you could please also put a little history on the status of this document, please.
Sure. Gustavo, I can. Next slide, please. So this is a really old draft. It was published in 2013. And this draft describes the services that are provided by the TMDB, which is the trademark database, something that was created for the ICANN trademark clearinghouse. And registries and registrars use this draft to implement the integrations with those services. When the first version was published, we already had several conversations with registries and registrars regarding this. So the first version was quite mature and stable. There were no major changes since May 2014. The intended status of this draft is informational. I don't know if that's going to be an issue with this being a working group document, or we need to go to independent tracks. I don't know. That's a good question, right? As I mentioned before, this draft has been implemented by registries, registrars, and the clearinghouse in the case of the GTLD space. Next slide, please. Back in 2016, the idea was to publish this as an RC. The draft was adopted by the EPP extension working group, which is the working group that precedes this working group. On the last phase of the draft, we received some comments from Patrick. And based on those comments, we had we had meetings with Patrick, and we modified that document that is there. That document is an ICANN document. It's not related to this draft. Well, it's linked from this draft, but it's not like a normative reference. Well, I don't remember, so. But at the end of the day, we modified that document. We verified some things with the clearinghouse, and everything worked out. So we're good. Next slide. To the best of my knowledge, there are no pending action items on this draft. It should be fairly easy to publish it as an RFC. As I mentioned before, this is really mature. I mean, it has been in operations for years. In the case of the utility space and new utility program, it's used, I mean, everywhere. And this draft is linked from several legal contracts, so we really want to have a stable reference because it has been expired for some time in the past, and it's maybe not a good idea to have an expired draft linked from a legal contract. Next slide. And that's it. I mean, I don't know if you have any questions.
Nobody has a question, then we have a questions.
Okay.
So Jim Galvin, not wearing a chair hat. So this document, like the data escrow documents, has a fair amount of history and existence. So it also has fairly broad deployment. But documenting it was an issue because from a technical point of view, it was just missing the ICANN side. It was missing the policy side of it, what it needed to look like. And we needed some changes on that side in order for this document to be considered stable. So what we need actually still at this point is the one objection was from Patrick Fulstrom way back when you had the reference in here. We're going to seek just to make sure that Patrick wants to relieve his objection, that all of that has been satisfied. And in this document, like the escrow documents, again, well, this is actually in better shape because there's been no changes to the document. It's just that it now has a context in which to live, which is accurate and correct and functioning with the matching rules defined by ICANN. So we'll be able to release this document and do a working group last call and move it along, as long as there's no objections. We need that one objection from Patrick to be just to be pulled back, I guess is the phrase for it. But unless anyone else has any questions or comments. It's about the matching rules. Yeah. So in his slides, you'll see in his slides, he has a reference to the update that is now present on the ICANN side that fixes the conflict.
Yeah. Jim Reeds, just a quick question for clarification. Are you going to plan to publish as an informational RFC, or are we going to have potential feedback, pushback again from the ISG, and then perhaps have to go down the individual submission path?
I'm not expecting any pushback on this one. It should be an informational document, and I expect that it would be okay for it to go through as a working group document work product. But Barry's up there. Let him speak to that.
Yeah, this is Barry. I can't speak for the ISG as a whole, and who knows what some AD will question. Yeah. But as I said before, it is reasonable for this working group to put out informational specs when it makes sense for them to be informational. So.
Okay, thank you. Next. Okay. So you wanted to have this put up, Jim, because.
So, thank you. Just going back to this particular slide that was there, and just to recap what I think are some actions coming out of this group as we look at our milestone list, and before we get to talking about new work and jumping into the next thing here. We had, in August, we had 2 milestones for the data escrow documents. I think that we'll leave those milestones alone for the moment because those documents are just about ready to be, they're at the tail end of their working group last call to be submitted to the ISG. So at least, the chair's suggestion here would be that we not change the milestone date or anything at the moment. We'll just let them progress since they're in theory going to be pushed out soon, and that should be fine. With respect to RDAP, we had September, October, and November deadlines for partial response, sorting and paging, and then reverse search. I believe what I heard from Mario is that he believes that the partial response and the sorting and purging, purging. Little faux pas. Sorry about that. Partial response and sorting and paging documents are, stable from his point of view, which suggests that the next obvious step for them is to consider whether or not they're ready for publication. We do have an issue about implementation and how much further we want to push on implementation before the working group agrees for them to go forward. So I'm thinking that one way to force that question is to suggest that we move those into working group last call so that we can have people comment explicitly that they don't want them to go forward without a particular action. I'm thinking that they just want to find a way to force the working group to respond and react to these documents. And then if there are implementation concerns, people can speak to that, and then we can, decide at the end of that we're going to wait for another period and do that. I would like to suggest that we actually put those two into working group last call, and we'll see how that plays out. If it ends up that we want to hold them back because we want more implementation experience, then we'll have to turn that into updating the milestones with respect to those two documents. And one option might be that we not actually have a milestone for them, okay? And you'll see why that might be relevant as we get into new work and we start moving forward. Or we might just update the milestones, but we can make that decision later. So working group last call for those two documents following this IETF is where we'll go with those. The reverse searching document, I get the sense that there's still work to be done there. We don't think that that is as stable as the other two. So what we need to think about here is what to move the milestone to, since it really was due now. And I don't know if Mario, if you want to say anything about that now, or we can take that to the list. We can just see what, listening to my co-chair here saying, let's just take it to the list. We should make a decision about how far we want to push out the milestone for that. So we'll try to pass that message on to the working group, and people can take time to think about what they want to do there. Okay. OpenID we'll just leave alone for right now. Although maybe, I don't know, Scott, if you want to say anything about it or not. You don't have to feel obligated to, but you're standing up, so please go ahead.
Sure, Scott Hollenbeck. With respect to this document, I think the protocol piece is actually pretty solid. It hasn't changed much in the last year or so. And in fact, the different machinations of people who have looked at it, like in the ICANN context in particular, while they move the bits and pieces around, they're still basically using the same protocol. And so I feel pretty confident about that. I am much less confident in whether or not I got the IANA registry bits correct. You may recall there's a section in there registering OAuth claims, that are used to help document attributes of appropriate identities. And there's a lot of dependence there on what comes out of ICANN's, expedited policy development process, anyway, lots of acronyms there. I think at some point we have to make a call. I could pull out the IANA registry bits and just say, hey, look, when ICANN gets its act together there, those claims can be registered, and then the protocol piece progresses independently, or we just hold on a little bit longer and try to capture the bits we know will be necessary, to meet ICANN's needs. And I guess I'm kind of leaning towards, let's just hold on a little bit. They seem to be making progress. And, who knows, 6 months from now, they may actually have some outputs.
So thank you for that. I mean, speaking for myself, I'm inclined to not make a milestone change at the moment. I mean, on the ICANN side, there's a certain expectation of something to appear relatively soon that the RDAP working group on that side can actually do something with. And we'll have a better sense by the time we get around to the next IETF meeting what we want to do with this document. We may actually be working on it by then or not, but in any case, we'll have some data with which to decide what to do about the milestone. So, okay, with that, back to you.
Yes, okay. So we were looking at the milestones, of course, because the next topic on our agenda is a report of the joint ICANN TechOps and interim Regext meeting. And based on that, we're going to have a look at our milestone list to see what we want on there. So let me just put the slides up. Interim Ignite. And Jim is going to present on this chair head off, of course.
Okay. So this is me presenting as myself, not as co-chair here, but go to the next slide. So we did something new and interesting. We've sort of mentioned this a few times here, but let's try to be very clear and specific here about the relationship and what was going on. The Tech Ops is a technical operations group in ICANN, and it is comprised of essentially technical representation from registries and registrars on the GTLD side. And there's quite a lot of them in there. And you know, obviously many more of them than are here. For whatever reason, you know, it just turns out that ICANN is just the place where you get a lot of registrars in particular, and certainly more registries than we have here in this room to participate. So it's an ideal place to have and make sure that we get exposure of particular, you know, technical details about registries and registrar operations. So we did something new this time, which was to have an interim meeting for Regext, but we made it joint with the Tech Ops group at the last ICANN meeting, which in fact was 2 weeks ago in Montreal. And I had put this same slide up there at the beginning of that meeting as a way of introducing the IETF relationship to them. And so the slide is here as a way of introducing the ICANN relationship to the IETF so that everyone is sort of on the same page as to what's going on here. In particular, there are 14 potential documents to, you know, ask for the working group to adopt and then push them through on the registration services side of the work stream here. And, you know, that would then create a set of milestones for this group to work with. And, you know, folks from that side, we believe that we have gotten many more of them to join the mailing list. They're not likely to appear physically at an IETF meeting, but they will be on the mailing list and will be able to move documents forward and participate in that way. So the goal at the interim meeting was to review those 14 potential documents and, you know, think about what they would consider the priority and how they wanted to approach them. And then, you know, come here to seek adoption. Think of the Tech Ops group as a design team in an IETF context is sort of the way to view that body of people and the work that they do. And then to bring those documents to this group and consider adoption here and move them along on the IETF side. So that's sort of the relationship and what's going on there. We conducted that joint meeting under the IETF note well, so that was exposed there in that group, and you know, everybody aligned with that, so that was a good thing. It's worth noting that in the middle of the slide is a best practice actually that should be best, no it is, it's best practice.domains website. There is a group of registrars that have created a website. All 14 of these documents in their original form from that group are on that website. And so they had created a place where they had put things. They in fact have, those documents are all produced in our internet draft format for that matter. And that's where they all were and having that discussion. So go ahead.
Alex Mayhofer, I'm a little bit picky here, but you do know very well what internet standards in the IETF context means. It's like the very core of the internet protocols that have extremely broad deployments and with a massive amount of implementations. I don't think that any of those 14 documents qualifies for that.
So at least a good portion of those
of like internet standards. I don't know how many internet standards we have, but definitely not the 8,600. Yeah.
So, fair enough. I take your point, and let me. Yeah, you're right. I was pretty freewheeling with saying the word standard. I've been called on that before. In fact, just earlier this morning before this meeting. So yeah, we need to be a little more careful about use of that word. It may be that some of these things really become informational documents, for example, as opposed to a standard. And I do need to be much more careful about that in the IETF context, the use of that particular word. So fair enough, we'll take that on board. And as part of our review and evaluation of these things, we'll make a better determination of their status and what we're supposed to do with them. So next slide. So this is a quick rundown of what we talked about there, and I will touch on these briefly, and I'll spend actually a bit more time on the last one. The 14 documents can actually be brought together and categorized into these 5 documents in these 5 areas. So registry mapping, we really only referenced it in the interim meeting. Registry mapping, as you know, has actually been work that has been moving forward slowly under the auspices of this working group. It's not really an adopted document in this working group, but there is an internet draft which is out there, and there is a small set of people who have been progressing that document. In particular, Roger Carney and has been leading some interim meetings along the way here. We've had several in trying to advance this work. It's not yet ready to be adopted by the working group or to seek adoption of it, but that work is proceeding. So we're just going to leave that one where it is at the moment. The secure auth info transfer and the registry maintenance notification and unhandled namespaces have all been documents here. The secure auth have all been internet drafts. The auth info document got quite a lot of discussion at the TechOps meeting. And I think there is a revision of that document which will be produced based on comments that were received there. But all three of these are now in a relatively stable state. And they will, we expect that we will seek working group adoption for all three of these documents, or at least the next version of secure auth info transfer, and then the other two which have existed for some time. We've had some discussions about them in this working group, in the working group meetings. And we will, these authors will bring these documents and be seeking working group adoption on them in the near future. And so we will seek to put them onto our registration services side of the work stream in this working group, and be looking to get some milestones for them. And then I guess, as was asked for before, we'll need to get document shepherds for each of those as part of the adoption process. The registry registrar reporting document, as you know, we've had discussions here about an internet draft. As you can see the reference on there, the dataset draft, the dataset file format draft, and in particular, the registry registrar mapping was a new proposal, a concept which myself and my colleague who's actually out there remotely, Joseph Yee, had brought to the TechOps group to have some discussion about it. And what I'd like to do here is just to make a presentation of a revised set of slides. It's just a few slides to sort of talk about the concept and expose it here in this group so that everyone has seen it once. We don't have a document that's an internet draft that's been published, so we're not going to immediately seek working group adoption on this thing, but it is work that we expect at some time in the not too distant future. There'll be another internet draft, and so there'll be more discussion about this as we move it forward. I expect that it will get a good deal more discussion in the TechOps group in particular, because the registrars and the registries there will want to talk about what that document looks like and what its relationship with the dataset file format document is, so that we can bring both of those together and decide what to move forward in this working group and seek working group adoption on those things. So that's actually the readout there. I will jump to giving a presentation about the reporting document in a moment, but let's have a discussion on these 5 things. And please, George.
George from APNIC. So I'd like to start by saying I think you have a really good sense of the momentum in your agenda, and you've done a good job of a reduction of what needs to be done. You've got a cogent story. Let's do this work. So viewed from 10,000 feet, this is good. You have a backlog of work. You're looking at your adjustments and pace. This is what you're going to carry forward in your stream. This is good. I now step to another view. I'm in the other half of the room. I'm in the RDAP half of the room. The meeting, the pace of the meeting is heading from somewhere around 60-40 to 70-30, a business-to-business function, registrar-registry function, compared to the public service of RDAP. We don't actually get mind share, and it's probably a function of the nature of our work. And it's not a comment more than a whinge, but essentially we have very little mind share in this room, and you're building a lot of work that's about registry, registrar, business to business, an important function. And I'm sitting over here saying, where's our mind share to move forward in the public RDAP commitment? We don't have this investment in time and energy coming to say, look at the body of work, let's do this. This is our stream. Your stream is progressing. Our stream is paddling a little slower. It just feels strange. I don't think this is a problem you can fix. I guess I'm just whinging at the world. Rail, rage against the night.
Rage against the dying of the light.
Yeah.
Dylan Thomas. I'd like to address that if I may.
Sure. I was going to respond too, but I'll let you go first.
Slide.
Go back a slide.
Go back a slide. Is that the?
There's only 2 slides, so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this didn't say anything useful for that, but the bit of taking the RDAP core protocol documents and progressing them to internet standard that we discussed.
That's going to be new work, and that's coming up. That's not a presentation we've had yet.
Right, but and I think so. The answer there is I think over there. Thank you. I think you'll see more meat when we get to that.
Yeah.
But so I wouldn't worry about it too much now.
So just putting on a chair's hat for a moment, recall that this working group essentially has 2 work streams, if you want to think of it that way. We have an RDAP work stream and a registration services work stream. And the RDAP work stream has just been focused on Mario's documents primarily, the ones that we were just talking about. But we will see shortly that there is going to be a new work item that's going to be proposed when we get there. Well, actually, it's not even on the slides on the agenda. It's going to come up under any other business, for that matter. I just happen to have a heads up that is coming. So there will be some movement there. But you're right, George. I mean, we have 2 work streams, and so we have to develop and move along work in both of those spaces. And the chairs do know that responsibility and accept that, and we're certainly paying attention to that detail as far as that's concerned. Okay, let me go back to just being myself here for the moment, and we'll go to the slides on the registrar reporting, and while he's working to bring up those slides. So again, this is just an introduction of a concept. There are, between registries and registrars, they do communicate. There's a production. You can bring slides up. Yes.
Which one? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, for the. They do communicate on a regular basis by a production of some reports. So registries do provide some data, a summary of some data back to registrars as a way to facilitate their interactions and how they conduct business. And it's generally referred to as reporting in this context. I mean, that's sort of the work that happens in all of this. And so every registry in today's world produces a set of reports that registrars consume. And the overall goal here and the objective is to create some mechanism for creating stability in what those reports look like. Okay, and that just seems, and since that really is a technical function, it feels like it's an ideal thing to have in the IETF, that sort of functionality. Now, to allow some flexibility in all of this, that's really what this is about. So for here, this is just about presenting a concept which was presented there. Half of this was reasonably well received and seemed to get a good traction and support. And then there's a set of issues that were kind of set aside as still discussion points. And I will separate those 2 here as we're going through these slides, and then we'll see where we are. So this is, if anybody has any comments about this, we certainly would welcome all of that input. But next steps here again are that this will just continue in its design effort for right now. So this is just, what do you think? You've obviously never seen this before because there's no document except for the slides that exist. But any reactions? And then you'll now have the slides, and we can continue some discussion on the mailing list about this too. So with that as an opener, let's go to the next slide. So this is kind of an example. If you were to look at the best practice domain site, you would see that there is a specification for, at least these 3 reports: transaction report, a premium name support, a domain info report. There's some specifications there. And, this is what these things look like. They are reports that are, have these columns in them, this set of data elements that are there. And then you create a file which has that data in it. Just think in those terms, in terms of what's created. And so this is just an example of the fact that there's, commonality across here. And in fact, you can run into issues about whether or not, status in each of those columns is the same status and whether it means the same thing or not. So you're going to have column headings there for the data that's being reported and what it means. Next slide. So what we have today are reports that are static. Each registry just decides for itself what it's going to do, and it does that, and that's a done deal. The registry chooses that format, the content, syntax of the reports, and the registrar is just required to comply with whatever the registry does. And that's sort of the model that exists today and what's there. The kind of model that we're looking to get to here is that the reports are still static. Maybe stable is a better word here than saying static. But the format of the report is standardized, or that there's a framework, there's a known mechanism for understanding the report. So rather than the registry just being able to unilaterally decide what something looks like, there's a framework and a stability about what that report is likely to look like for registrars to consume them. Okay, so to facilitate that and provide a bit of a more stable mechanism for that communication. Obviously, we still want the syntax of the elements in the report to be standardized. We don't want people just inventing anything that they can put in these reports. And to some extent, you can imagine that even with EPP, for example, we know what the registration data looks like. There are some fairly known definitions of a lot of this data that's there. Okay, there's derived data that's in some of these reports, but there's a certain stable set of data which is there. We know what that is. So that's the reporting elements, being standardized. You want to know what's in a report and be able to consume them easily and not have to look at each one as an individualized registry-based thing. Okay, and then we also want to have a known set of reports. We want to have a way to consume what reports are likely to look like. Okay. So that's sort of where we are today and kind of the model of where we'd like to get to in all this. Next slide. So there basically are two principal parts of this proposal at the moment. The concept here in both of these parts, so this is part one, had some pretty good traction in the Tech Ops group last time. But from the point of view of the IETF, what we do is we create an IANA registry. If you think of these reports as being a CSV file, right, that's what each report would look like. So if you imagine that as the concept here, we create an IANA registry, and we model this after the way the EPP extensions was done, which is what sort of formed this group and caused this group to come into existence when we first did that document. And so the column heading registry would have the following information that's listed there. Each particular column heading would get an ordinal value, and you'll see why that's relevant when we get to the example. Obviously, the name of the column, a reference to the definition of the data that's there, which of course would also define the syntax for the element. Okay, and then you want to know where the element came from and some other administrative elements, but that's just sort of the registry that's in IANA. And it would be a first come, first served registry, much like the EPP extensions registry is. So the only strictness here about it is that whatever you put in the registry is self-consistent and doesn't conflict with anything else that's there. In this particular case, that's kind of important, that detail. If people use a status, you want them to use the same status, for that particular purpose. So that's that concept. Go ahead.
Hi, Jim. Jim Reed. Just a statement of the bleeding obvious here, but whenever these things are going to be put in a first come, first served basis, I hope there's going to be information recorded about who it was that asked for this particular column to be added to the registry. I've imagined that we could have a situation where a registry asks for some kind of a column extension to be put here, it doesn't get used, gets forgotten about, and then comes along and say 5 years time and then says, is anybody using this thing? Who's responsible for it? Can't get rid of it.
Yes. That's just sort of a standard problem, first come, first serve registries. I do understand that. The only requirement would be that the reference to the definition exists. Maybe we do need to have a process for cleaning up the registry if it gets big, but we're not going to address that right now. We don't speak to that issue even with EPP extensions.
I wasn't specifically speaking to the issue of the maintenance, but if this does crop up later, it's finding out who was responsible for having put that first thing in the first place. If we've captured the information about who's requesting these things at the point they're added to the registry.
Yeah, no, registrant to the element. It's captured right there.
Okay, right.
It's one of those things, yes. Yeah, we do know who put it there, which doesn't mean that you're going to be able to reach them again because you know how that goes. Email addresses change. I mean, that doesn't really make the problem go away, but okay, next slide. Now, there's actually 4 of these slides, and I'm not really going to walk down through them. This is just intended to show that looking at the 9 documents that are on the best practice domain site, we simply collected together all of the column headings and all the data that was requested to be in those reports. You can click to the next slide there. You can see here there's an ordinal reference number. Each particular column heading gets its own ordinal reference. You'll see why that's important in a moment here when we get to part 2. And of course, there would be a reference to these things with respect to doing this particular work. Presumably, we would pre-fill this registry with whatever we define this first time around. So the RFC number there is just the same for all of them, whatever we put in our first document if we get that far. And as is typical in these mechanisms, in this case, it would be the ISG would be the registrant, only because they would be defined in an RFC. The specification would be there and would be a working group product. So that's the way that works. So yeah, and there were 31. Once we took those 9 things together, there were 31 elements that were looked for. And this is, again, it's a concept, so we just kind of looked at what was there when we put it together and made it self-consistent. So obviously there's some discussion to be had about whether that's the right set of data elements, if there need to be more or something like that. That's certainly all open for discussion. So that's one of the registries. There are two parts to this proposal. One is to have an IANA registry of the column heading, so the data essentially that goes into the reports. Next slide. The next thing is to similarly create an IANA registry of actual reports that are used and what they look like. And this is all exactly what you would expect. It's fairly obvious stuff. The report name, reference to the definition, and this is the critical part that ties it back to the other registry, the ordered list of column headings in the report using the ordinal value. So let's go to the next slide and I'll show you what that looks like. This is actually the list of 9 reports that are on the best practice.domain site. So we just kind of built this out to show what it looks like. And you can see here that the report name is over on the left, be a similar kind of reference and registrant, but the columns there, what you do is you list the ordinal number for the columns out of the column registry. So the data that you want in this report out of the registry of the data elements that are possible, and you make, and that's an ordered list is what's important. And as you look through it, you'll see in some cases the numbers there are certainly not monotonically increasing. Well, they're not increasing in any way, monotonic or otherwise. But it is a list of the data elements that are in that particular report. And that's the way this much is supposed to work. So that's kind of the, that in fact is the proposal for creating a framework for stability in this reporting mechanism between registries and registrars. And these are the 2 parts that did get some traction there. And then the rest of the other slides, when we get to them here, are more about topics for discussion that did not really have any particular consensus. And I'll talk about what was going on with them when we get there. But go ahead, Alex.
Alex Mayover, Nick.IT. Could you please explain which kind of advantage you expect from publishing that information via the processes at the IETF rather than publishing them directly on bestpractice.domains?
Yes, and in fact, we had quite a lot of discussion about this even in the TechOps group going back to the May Global Domains Division's ICANN's GDD Summit. When the TechOps group had a meeting there was a lot of discussion about why this needs to be in the IETF as sort of the selected SDO, if you will, to put it in. The problem with bestpractice.domains as compared to this is it's not a persistent archived reference. That's the issue. It's just a website that somebody put up, and as much as we might want to believe that it is an ideal thing, the key characteristics of any SDO is that it is a persistent archived point of reference.
You could create a GitHub repository that's probably more stable than best practice and domains. We had that discussion before. This is rubber stamping of a draft so that it gets an RFC number so that somebody can walk up to a registry and say, hey, it's an RFC, you need to implement it. That's the only reason. And that was Tobias said to me in person. Yeah.
Well, it is a market issue. Whether or not you're required to do something or not is the IETF has this.
Sorry to interrupt. Especially because obviously those documents get better review at the venue that's outside of the IETF rather than inside of the IETF. So why doesn't that venue over there care about publishing those documents? This is pure rubber stamping. Sorry.
I don't view it as rubber stamping. I can see where one might think of it that way. ICANN is not a technical body in that way. I would not expect ICANN as a body to produce, this kind of technical specification, just me personally. And in general, there's a relationship, broadly speaking, between the IETF and ICANN. Technical specifications are generally looked for from the IETF for the most part, and ICANN does the policy work that sits on top of these specifications. I mean, that's just me personally sort of talking. Others may have a slightly more nuanced view about it all. You're right. I have said about the best practice.domains thing that, as a registry, okay, on the business side, I don't want to implement something. I don't want to move towards something which is not, in fact, a persistent and archived reference. And ICANN as an organization just doesn't have that facility. But, this is a technical specification. IETF is an ideal place for it. It works. So I just came here with it. There might be other places to take it, but this is sort of the natural choice.
Sorry, Jim, this is as much as a technical specification as the inventory list of a supermarket. Sorry. Yes.
Okay. Okay. That's fine. I'll leave it at that. Okay. Next slide. We did talk about some other things in that meeting. These are just some things that had come up, and they were not, they were discussion points. They were left as discussion points. There was no particular consensus about them. So I collapsed based on the comments that were in the TechOps meeting. These three items into just baseline requirements is what I called them here. But anyway, the reports would be CSV files. The reaction from folks and I thought this was kind of interesting. I hadn't really thought about this until somebody started talking about it. But if you start talking about actually creating a file or having a file name or it being a CSV file, as opposed to focusing on the framework in which to produce the reports, whatever the report is, whether the report is a file or some other delivery mechanism, all right, then you need to separate the distribution mechanism, the publication mechanism out from all of that. And that was really a discussion that we had gotten into. Some people may not want to produce these reports as files. They may have other mechanisms for doing it and other reasons for doing that, which might be perfectly reasonable. So an open question really at large in the community is, what do we want the distribution mechanism to look like, and do we want any kind of stability in that or not? So that remains to be an open question. And then there's the general question of unrecognized column headings, what that really means. If a report is in the registry and it has a certain set of expected data elements that are present in the report, what do you do if there are additional data elements in the report, and how do you handle that? Some of that depends a little bit on the distribution mechanism, but we can probably find some words that move towards the direction of just ignoring them, or at least being able to consume them but not actually doing anything with them. Sort of have to talk about what we want that to look like. So that's an open question. Next slide. We did have some discussion at the time, because when I had presented it at that time, discussion about a file name, because there are other kinds of metadata issues. So one of the things that comes up is we do have the dataset file format, which this group has looked at before. We've had a presentation about it and talked about it. One of the interesting things, a clear distinction between the dataset file format and this proposal, is the dataset file format actually does cover the metadata and the full set of metadata that would go with this reporting mechanism. This kind of has implied metadata, or some amount of metadata would be in the file name if we were to specify a file name for it. But that, of course, implies a certain distribution mechanism. So there's some question as to whether that's the right thing to do, and maybe we need to do something different. And so, that's why all of this is there. This was what the original proposal was. And thinking about file names, we tried to put out there sort of the minimum kind of metadata that one might want and need as part of doing this report. But again, it just became an open question when it was all done. I think that's it, isn't it? Yeah, that was the last slide. So that's where we are. So these last two slides are, still just sort of discussion points. I expect that the next steps here are that we will have some discussion continuing on our mailing list here. The Tech Ops as a design team is going to continue to talk about what would work best for that particular registry and registrar community, and then we'll just look to continue and finalize any discussion here in the IETF.
Marcus.
Marcos Sanz, DENIC. I'm not so much about or against standardizing this as Alex is. I'm a bit.
I'm not against standardizing.
Okay, I'm unimpressed about this. I just have the feeling that we are, this working group is over and over and over again standardizing the same things. And this is just a new variation of escrow. If this group says that escrow is a working group item and we define escrow formats, this is the same thing, just that the flow of the data is in another direction. But coming up with a new syntax and column headings, and it's the same work as we've done before.
Just trying to think about how you're right, all of these are about data flow. I guess the only immediate observation that occurs to me is the actual data in each of these two sets of things really is somewhat different. The escrow is about the registration data. These reports are more about data that's coming through EPP and collecting elements that are coming from there, especially the transaction reports, for example, or name servers that go with the domain name. So it's not always true. There's a bias away from personal information, except that there are reports that do have personal information in them. So that's not really 100% true. But data escrow is very clearly all the registration data. There's a lot more data in these reports that is not in escrow, I guess is really kind of my point at the moment. But otherwise, I take your point. I don't know what to do with it yet. Go ahead, Alex.
Alex again. To be quite frankly and quite clear, I'm not against standardizing those things because we all know that those are a lot of a burden to the community of the registrars. Yeah, as I said a couple of times, I don't feel that an RFC is like the right venue to publish it, and to give like to this a little bit more of a productive touch. For example, there is something that's called the registrar registry data group that exists as like an informal group within the center environment, sort of like, and we have been doing some kind of standardization there as well, and we have published a couple of documents, web pages on a web page that states how we as a group believe that things should be done, and people are actually implementing that. So that's could be another way. It's a little bit sad to understand that the CPH TechOps can't publish stable documents, if I get that right, or stable document references. But yeah, so again, I have nothing against standardizing those things. I just feel that the scope of the IETF doesn't really fit the purpose of those documents 100%.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jim. If I can step in, chairhead off, I hear an interesting thing here. We have had this discussion before, I realize that TechOps within ICANN is a GTLD only accessible group. Center is a CCTLD exclusive group. We're here in the IETF to standardize things. If we want to standardize things, we should open these groups and discuss among each other, what the joint definition should be. I think that would be very valuable. Not everybody going to sit in their own group. And with all due respect, I said this before, everything that comes from ICANN working groups feels like pressure of doing things for policy instead of choosing the correct technical background. I very appreciated that the TechOps groups had a joint interim meeting with Regext, because that opened it up for other participants to join. But I think we need to have more of this to not get the impression that we are being run by ICANN. And that's just my remark.
Go ahead, Barry, you go first on.
Alex is a lot taller than I am. So Roger Carney says another reason to bring to the IETF. I don't remember what was being said.
He's talking about this. I was going to make that comment too. I know where Roger's coming from. Thank you, Roger. I had that on my mind. So speaking for myself, let's see. You're right. Center is CCTLD. This particular TechOps group is GTLD. That, in fact, is the reason why bringing it to the IETF, or it is at least another reason why bringing it to the IETF is sort of an ideal thing, because it is an open group. And I know that it's easy to think that something originates in ICANN, and people have a certain target view about ICANN, wanting to point a negative finger at them for any number of reasons. But, speaking for myself, this idea for this work might have originated at ICANN, but I don't see that as any different than the work originating anywhere else. The idea came up. It's a problem that needs to be solved. From my point of view, speaking personally, this is a good home for solving it. I'm going to take advantage of whatever I need to take advantage of to get the best work possible. And I think that it's incumbent on us to look at both what Center has done and what the TechOps group is sort of proposing, and we bring them here in this community and we discuss them here openly and bring both sets of groups here. Okay. So I don't see this as a stumbling block or a concern. I see it as an opportunity, and let's just bring the work here and do the right thing with it. And that's really what I'm after here.
Just a minute, Jim.
Yeah.
So my question actually is, are there other participants that we need to involve in this? Apart from CCTLDs and GTLDs.
So
I'm thinking of RARs, I don't know, enum registries. But I'm thinking of, how can we get the most broad support for something to standardize?
I don't know. I think that's a standard problem, if you will, a standard problem in the IETF, making sure you've got the right community of people. Look, we have put together a community of people who have a shared problem, and they want to have a stable, singular, if you will, solution to that problem. And we're just a group of people moving towards that. And, that's sort of the role that the IETF plays. Do we have everybody in the IETF that we need? We don't recruit people per se, but I think that, at least speaking personally, I've done what I can to reach out to communities I can get to get some review and cover of this solution space that we're looking at here, and we'll continue to do that as we go along.
Okay, looking at the time, I'm cutting the line after Wilhelm.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah,
Jim, couple of quick comments. Jim, I think your approach here is very sensible and pragmatic, and you should just go ahead with this. Alex's concerns about the IETF rubber stamping are well made, but I think they might be a little bit misguided. And I think the thing to do here is it's quite clear that this working group seems to be the obvious focus for all this kind of effort, rather than have closed communities such as ICANN, GTLD folks. Maybe ICANN registrars have got a say in this kind of thing, a stake in this too. Plus, we've got Center, which is a closed club for European CCTLDs. Again, doesn't address the complete audience or the complete community. This seems the right place to do this kind of thing. So I think we should go ahead and do this work here. And if we feel that this is being abused because we're being expect to rubber stamp stuff that's done to anybody else, deal with that problem when it arises.
Thanks, Jim. Rick?
Thanks, Rick Wilhelm. Just a comment, Jim. I think your comments about the CPH TechOps are largely right on. I will offer that there's not, while there's been a fair bit of discussion about this at CPH TechOps, there's not a complete agreement and consensus on the problem to be solved, the way it should be solved, and such. So it's not, when this stuff is coming here from CPH TechOps, it's not coming with sort of it's coming with a set of support, but not the massed and agreed there wasn't a consensus call done within CPH Tech Ops or something like that, right? So there's still a fair bit of debate, myself included, around the merits of this kind of a proposal and what it memorializes, because these reports are the manifestation of a business relationship between two entities, and they're produced extra contractually, by which I mean not as part of a contractual requirement, which stands in contrast to the EPP work and the RDAP work, which is part of both. They are both part of contracts for GTLD registries and registrars. Thanks.
Thank you. So thanks for all the comments. I think what we're going to do here is continue this just as design work, evolutionary work, much like registry mapping. It's just going to move forward with a group of people, and we'll see where we get to with that. So we're not doing any kind of call for adoption yet, but this is just a heads up that this kind of thing is moving forward, and it'll stay visible, just like registry mapping in this group, and we'll see where it goes. So let me go back over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Well, actually, as part of this item on the agenda, we were going to try to have a discussion on new milestones. But looking at the time, I think we will move that over to the mailing list, because we still have 2 presentations and we only have 10 minutes left. So let us continue on that. We have a presentation again by Mario, and Mario, you have 4 minutes.
Okay. After last meeting discussion about the possible replacement of JCAD with JS Contact in ADAP, I thought it could be useful for the working group to have a short overview of JS Contact to make you more aware of its features, but at the same time to demonstrate that it could really be a more efficient alternative to JCAD. In brief, JS Contact is a new contact card representation alternative to VCAD. Like JCAD is JSON based, and it fully supports the VCAD content, but it's not directly derived by VCAD. It follows an highly structured approach to the information modeling. The main object defined the contact card named JS card and a collection of contact cards named JS card group. The draft is the last version of the draft is 05 and is written by me together with Robert Stefanek of Fastmail, and the current working group is Dispatch, even if JMAP seems to be...
It is not. We are rechartering JMAP as we speak to include this, so it'll be done in the JMAP working group.
Okay, thank you. The draft obviously is still in progress. We are some open issues on the table, in particular how to represent the gender information, if we should include and how to include the information needed for the synchronization of multiple versions of the same contact card, and which is the best way to represent the information about the preference. A new version is ready to be published.
1 minute.
1 minute. Jump to skip this. I want to only to provide you with some examples. In the left side of the slide, there is an extract from another response using JCAD, and the right side there is the corresponding version of the JS card. The properties in bold are currently required in ADAP. The other two examples are taken by some use cases provided to me by Tom Harrison to test the JS contact capability to represent multilingual information and unstructured data like formatted addresses and formatted names. Please move to the next. This is an example of multilingual information, and the other. The next one is an example to represent unstructured data. The last slide is about a possible transition model between JCAD and JSCAD. The first scenario corresponds to the reverse status implementing the current ADAP standard. So it is identified by the ADAP level 0 tag in the ADAP conformance array. In this scenario, JCAD is required and JSCAD is optional. It can be requested by setting the parameter JSCAD to true. And the next scenario is the scenario corresponding to when the transition is completed. As in this scenario, the server implements JSCAD as required and JCAD as optional. I think that this transition model has some advantages. Only one content representation would be included into the response. The response would always be compared to FC 7483, but what is much more important is that backward compatibility would be guaranteed throughout the transition, and the servers and client could execute their transition in an independent way. So, okay. That's all.
Questions? Short, please. A question? I should just, take the discussion to the list.
Yeah. Please take a look at the slide to have private feedback to me.
Okay, then we have some new work suggestion for.
So very quickly, we did a site meeting. Next slide, please. On domain suggestion. On Tuesday morning, we had about 15 people in the room. Some of them were reading email, I guess. It was mostly registry side people. And next slide, please. So domain suggestion, I guess we all know what it is. The customer wants a domain name is taken. And someone proposes an alternative to the customer. So that's what registries typically do. Next, please. Very quickly, that's essentially the essence of things. So there's a name, it's taken, and some kind of tool proposes a different name to register to the customer. Next. So the question is now with registrars. That was like directly the registry end of things. Registrars also want to do that, maybe. Some of them have quite sophisticated tools already. But if they actually fetch information from the registries for that, then they might want to have a standardized API in order to get that from the registries. Yeah, so registrars deal with many registries, so in turn it would be really sad if each registry invented their own API for dealing with suggestions. Next, please. Essentially the protocol arena, we could do that over APP, we could do that over RDAP, we could do that over some other REST, other protocols. There's a range of input data that's maybe useful to create domain name suggestions for a customer. Some of that's actually personal information of the customer, so that's tricky. That's the area you can work in. Next one. So there's existing work. There's three things. There's an EPP extension from VeriSign that actually got, as far as I understand, deprecated, or at least pulled out of the SDK in favor of a REST-based model. There is some work on RDAP-based by Mario. He uses a link in a standard RDAP response to point to a suggestion server, and then delivers like a lightweight domain search researchery. And then there is another EPP extension that I actually created because I wasn't aware of the VeriSign extension that extends the domain check response. Next. So what was the major discussion during the side meeting? So the major points were that the registrar is better positioned has a better vantage point than the registry probably for many things because he's close to the customer, so he knows what the customer wants. Suggestions should sort of like belong to the free market. It's not something that the registry should do, and the registry has like a little bit better vantage point because they are aware of expiring domain names and stuff like that. We also found out that EPP is probably not a good protocol choice in the first place because it's a static interface. It's for provisioning rather than for querying. Things like quota come into play with that. Any suggestion would introduce additional delay and dependencies in the registry core, which we all want to avoid. And it does indeed address a different client side because the suggestion is targeted at the end customer while the EPP interface is targeted at the registry. So it might be related to the availability information. And for that, RDAP seems to be quite an interesting choice. The problem with that was that the room was full of registries and there were a few registrars. So next one, please. Yeah, discussion. If we would have time, that would have been the points that I would want to discuss. But to sum it up in one sentence, I think I will go ahead and do some REST-based API that I will send out to whatever, other group probably, and see if somebody else is interested. Yeah, that's from my point. Is it interesting? Is Regext the right venue? I start believing it's not. Yeah.
Roger Carney thinks this might be good for many smaller registrars. Larger registrars already do this.
Jim Reed, I'm sorry to say, Alex, I think this is a very, very bad idea. It doesn't need to be standardized either. And given your earlier comments about rubber stamping, I think it's rather ironic suggesting bringing other work to the Regext, which might be getting done elsewhere. I think this is a bad idea. Just kill it. Don't bring it here.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to any other business, and we're already 1 minute late, but I believe that Scott had a...
Yes, Scott Hollenbeck, and I'll try to go as quickly as I can, so thank you for sticking around. We have 5 proposed standard RFCs that have been out now for about 4 years. The RDAP specifications were published in 2015. So the RDAP specifications were published in 2015. We now have production implementation experience. Anyway, long and short of it, I'm thinking it's time that we look to address the captured errata, which are all editorial as far as I can tell, and take on an effort to move those 5 documents to internet standard status. So I had mentioned this at the Montreal meeting, had a couple of sidebar conversations, attempted to get some things started on the list without a whole lot of success. But I do have a 7482 BIS sitting on a machine, right over there. And what I'm going to propose is that we take on this effort, and if we agree that we want to do that, I will volunteer to do a little bit of cat herding in terms of coming up with proposals for document authors and document shepherds and whatnot. So I'd like to ask the chairs and our AD if you think that this is work that we can take on.
So thank you for that, Scott. And as folks might expect, the ADs and the chairs have all had this discussion, and we generally agree that this is good work to progress with and that we should do this. So it's just a matter of finding the right means to do it. There is a question about our charter, and we'll review that. We might need a tweak to the charter. We might not. That's an open question. But we think this is a good spot. And this speaks to George Michelson's issue, which he has now left the room, and so he's not going to hear this. This, along with, sort of the J-card stuff, all kind of fall onto the RDAP side of our work items. So there's plenty of momentum here going on both sides. So and with that.
Yeah, I agree with you. Good idea. Any other business? Going once, going twice, meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Rick, Wilhelm. Yeah, before you duck out. Well, that was fun. Oh, there's one more blue sheet. Oh, yeah, it's probably all. Blue sheet? Anybody see the clipboard somewhere? Blue sheets? There's one. Where's the other one? Anybody see the clipboard? Hold it up. No luck, huh? No joy?